Thanks all of you all for coming out here on this night with the small introductions and the invitations that were sent out. I am happy it reached whoever it reached and that you came out here today. I'm really surprised by some of those who are here, and I'm very pleased by the gathering of the kinds of people who are here. That's really reason why I'm doing this. I actually wanted to do this for the last 2 years when Black Box had this thing with Afra, and they'd opened it up and they said, who wants to go next? And I said, I wanted to do it because for a couple of reasons. One, Trinidad, we kind of innocent of process and lineage of causation, of how things happen, what caused what caused what, to end up with whatever we have in front of us now. So without that sense of causation, we end up being superstitious, So this thing is like this because X and some kind of whatever. When no, there's a lineage and a causation towards those kinds of things. And for me, especially in the world of NGOs, trade unions, and the progressive movement, because I inherited stuff from 2 generations before me, and that was only because I forced them to speak and sat down at their feet and kind of shook things off from the tree. I kind of understand the necessity for institutional memory and for apprenticeship and for passing on information and those kinds of things. So, the ACT website is an open source website. Most of the documents that we have generated, all those things throughout the 2 decades of our stuff, it's all there. You could pull down all kinds of things. I mean, you could see the cut and truss of all kinds of stuff. The documents are all there. But there's more grist to the mill in terms of what happened. And it's really, really essential that people understand. Activism has become a kind of pretty word that people throw around. All kinds of people are activists. I've witnessed people actually die for activism in Trinidad, I could say that, it's a very serious business. And, the things that we won were won at great cost. But we need to understand the strategies that we utilize to win those things. Those things didn't just happen, they didn't just fall from the tree. They were a result of all kinds of different processes and strategies and those kinds of things. There are all kinds of things. I was now telling someone, say that I was just signing up every single program that is operating in the creative industries right now is an ACT program. It's that operating in the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Planning, inside the Ministry of Arts. I would say about 90%, 85% of them. But our fingerprints are nowhere on the procurement document, if you want to call it that. That room in the front, Melda. So the thing is, I think it's deathly important that we understand what happened and how it happened and those kinds of things. So it's also important that groups are transparent with what we've done in all different aspects of what we did, the successes, the failures, the mistakes, all those different kinds of things. We have to be very, very clear about those things, and we have been inside our circles and stuff, but we want to put that information out there. It's very, very, very important that we understand these things. So let's jump. You're filming. You just take pictures because they're going to do that already. So because now we're going to jump into right, so I'll just jump straight into it. We have a lot to cover. I apologize earlier on. We were supposed to have a projector, PowerPoint, etc. The cords, the connections aren't working with the laptops. So focus. It's not incredibly important you're able to see and read everything, but some of the things might jolt something first slide. Yeah. Right, so just to have a context of Trinidad, you know, I'd normally like to start with this slide. You should be seeing Carlyle Chang's Inherent Nobility of Man, that mural. Yeah, right, so Carlyle Chang, one of our, you know, 3 or 4 master artists, real master artists, you know, created this mural. It was inside the Piarco airport. He brought down imported stone to do it on and all those different kinds of things. And the politicians of the day said they wanted to move that wall, whatever, and that kind of stuff, and they were going to destroy it. This was, at the time, this was kind of a culmination of a certain language of Trinidad arts and all those different kinds of things. This is a culmination. It's a massive mural taking up like this back wall here. A number of architects, engineers, artists came forward, said that they could move the mural without any problems. But no, the minister decided he would sit down in the backhoe himself to destroy it, right? The metaphor for the destruction of the inherent nobility of man is something, as a scar that has kind of run through the artistic community for generations, as a kind of marker of the way that the state and this tongue kind of deals with its creative self, its creative soul, and its, you know, its higher self. So I just put that there as a kind of way to frame the discussion. So next slide. Right, so I need to set a context. Right, there's a global, right now, for the last 20 years, there's been a global creative industries revolution, right? A creative economy revolution. The creative industries are now the second largest industries on planet Earth. They're making $2.2 trillion a year. It has been the growth economy of the last 20 years. It is what a lot of economies are using to transform themselves into service-led economies. So they're leading with the creative to kind of re-engineer and rejig cities, industries, communities, all kinds of things to jumpstart things to the next level. They're using it as a way as a kind of steroid for tech and IT, right? To kind of go as fast as it could to the next level in terms of its incubation time, in terms of creating products and its incubation, in terms of consumption, innovation, and those kinds of things. The UK has been making £230.4 million a day with the creative economies, right? That's the 2016 figures, right? That's 2.3 billion TT a day with the creative economies. Local content regimes are now the norm in most countries, right? 35%, as much as 85 and 95% local content on radio and television. Nigeria is 95%. People understand that it's the only way that you could have proper broadcast industries, and people are going pell-mell at that. Streaming and cable, we know there's a golden age of TV going on right now. Content is king. All kinds of marginal peoples are being able to get to the center on screens simply because of the amount of content that is necessary for these mega corporations that are battling for people's eyeballs and that kind of stuff to win communities and win eyes and win stuff like that. And this is a massive, massive change in terms of consumption of television. You have blockbuster movies which are smothering smaller fare, but TV is now an option for marginalized people. Digital music has upended the monetization of the record industry and the music industry. Most of the money has moved to performances because artists and stuff can't make money, and labels can't make money by printing records or CDs or those kind of things, and they can't monetize online, so they have to find other ways. One of the things that has facilitated is the rise of the multi-million-dollar artists, where artists are brands in themselves, and they therefore have direct contact with their marketplaces, and they are using merchandise and performance events and all those different kinds of things to monetize that relationship and monetize the value of their brand. Right, so next slide, some of the UK's figures, $91.8 billion a year, right? See IT and software training for 34, that's 34 billion, 704 million, right? There are gaming companies bigger than oil and gas companies, right? Batman Arkham Asylum, I think is bigger than BP, right? And that's all they do is that one video game. The world is not what we still here with lawyer, doctor, them kind of things. That the world doesn't function in that mode anymore, right? We are 20 years behind the time in some ways, right? So all kinds of other things are happening globally. There's the rise of the heritage and museum gallery complexes, most signature buildings in most nation states and communities, beautiful galleries and museums and those kinds of things. Visual arts is now a multi-billion-dollar industry, where the 1% is storing their wealth in its, inside the, in visual arts. And what is happening is interesting is that the margins, so it was once dominated by Western European art and then an American modern art, but the margins are now storming the Bastille. So you have African nations, Asian nations, Middle Eastern nations, Latin Americans, and that kind of stuff storming the mainstream galleries and mainstream museums and those kinds, and the canons and those kinds of things. And with that storming ideas, because the museums and those kinds of things are where a lot of ideas of the status quo are kind of held, held firm and held in amber as sacred and those kinds of things. And those things are now being challenged by the storming of the Bastilles, by the margins. Of course, we are not anywhere in any of these conversations, right? So art are being used to transform cities by creating creative hubs. The whole transformation of Miami, the rebranding of Miami into an art city and a city of luxury brands and all those different kinds of things. And Miami created Art Basel, Miami. Simply, Miami, well, Miami launders drugs, but Miami is a specific kind of economy. It's a strange kind of American economy, offshore, all kinds of different kinds of things happen in Miami, right? You drive around Miami, you're wondering, where's the industry? Where's industry happening in Miami? Right, so there's a lot of offshore money in Miami that makes Miami fruit. But they wanted a way, they realized that, the 1%, the visual arts, this multi-billion dollar industry, and we're not in the game at all. And so they looked at the coldest time of the year, and they said, all of these, the major brokers and stuff are in the colder climes. Let's choose the coldest part of their year and bring them and set up a pool, an art market at that time, and we offer sun, sea, sand, sex, etc., whatever, those kinds of things. And so said, so done. Right? So right now, Miami mints about $1 billion plus for 3 days, 100,000 unique visitors for that weekend, for that long weekend. And they have transformed entire communities into luxury brand districts, into gallery districts, and those kinds of things in tiers from high-end, middle-end, medium-end, low-end galleries, and those kinds of things. And so they found a way to monetize that and bringing a new kind of tourists into Miami year-round. Right? There's the Perez Museum, there are a whole set of museums, a set of destinations. Right, so it's a period of unprecedented innovation, invention, and experimentation, right? And it is the arts that is leading it. The arts is, as I said, is the petri dish that IT and tech and all these people are front-loading their stuff into that, diving in, throwing it into the marketplace where it is bouncing up, where the competition and where the consumption and the innovation, open sourcing and that kind of stuff is speeding up the rate of innovation and experimentation. Right, there are all kinds of million-dollar events. People are monetizing heritage at an extraordinary rate across the planet. People are understanding the weight and value of heritage. and stuff. You have things like the Tomato Festival in Spain, is in Spain, and they are bringing in like 100,000 visitors and that kind of stuff. That's 40,000 more visitors than us for our carnival. This is to toss tomatoes, right? Print is still in the game, and you have things like Harry Potter and those kind of things to thank for that. At the time when they said that print looked like it was going out and that kind of thing, books like Harry Potter and those kind of things revitalized the print industry. All right, Harry Potter itself, for a grant of just under £20,000 from the Scottish Arts Council, Harry Potter, you know, when she was a broke, unemployed teacher, J.K. Rowling has contributed over £35 billion to the UK economy, right? From a £20,000 investment, right? That is the power of incubator funding, grant funding, these kinds of things. Retail has moved online. We've seen the destruction of big retail brands and those kinds of things. Every time you go to major metropolises like New York and that kind of stuff, a whole set of your old brick and mortar places are no longer there. Everything has moved online. The game has changed, right? So you have things like the Bilbao, Guggenheim, Frank Gehry, as I said, signature projects, all these kinds of things are happening now. This is a $2.2 trillion industry. Right. Who are we in all of that? But who are we fundamentally? Right? There's a quote that I always use in talking about Trinidad to kind of paint a picture to strangers and those familiar. Trinidad and Tobago is a twin island Caribbean republic of just 1.3 million people, sick, and a dot on the world map. Yet it has produced more than 150 world records, more than 100 world titleists, a panorama of human firsts, a bevy of world geniuses in letters, sports, science, and the arts, a warehouse of international awards ranging from Oscars, Grammys, Emmys, Tonys, to Nobel Prizes, Commonwealth Book Prizes, Bollywood Oscars, and more, a diaspora of boundless talent, and one of the richest creative cultures in the world, nearly unparalleled in the history of mankind in the length and breadth of its mythologies, iconographies, and folk idioms. TNT has also given the world the Calypso, the Steel Band, the Limbo, and over 300 Trinidad-style carnivals. The two largest gatherings in the Western world are Trini-style carnivals, Notting Hill and Brooklyn, with at their height over 4 million people on the streets. 4 million people. 2 black people get together on the streets in those cities, and it's cause for police action. We have 4 million. East Port of Spain did that. We did that. No public sector, no public sector or private sector did that. We, the people, did that. That is the power of Trinidad and Tobago people, right? 4 million people, billion-dollar economies. This is a $15 billion annual industries, the carnivals, worldwide. This is our figures from 2014. Calypso is one of the 10 core musics of the world, one of the oldest recording industries. In fact, Mango Vare, the first Calypso recording, is the only non-American song that is inside the time capsule that the Smithsonian have in whenever Trump destroys the planet with nuclear holocaust. What the cockroaches and aliens will find in that thing, the only non-American song is a Calypso. It's Mango Vare by Lovey's band, the first Calypso ever recorded 107 years ago. None of this legacy is visible in Trinidad and Tobago. Not in its architecture, institutions, curricula, not in monuments, not in its media, not in the public utterances of its leaders, nor in its civic and public spaces. It is as if this legacy has never existed. I could have grabbed any one of about 500 people, places, objects, and things and thrown them there. and it would still result in $1 billion plus in genius. So they have C.L.R. James, one of the great minds of the 20th century, Jeffrey Holder, Protean Renaissance artist, first black man to win Tony Awards, Hedda Headley, who people like Elton John and a number of singers call the singer's singer. Steve Stout from Laventille, who is the one who brokered hip-hop into becoming a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar industry by connecting mainstream brands and stuff with hip-hop artists and stuff. He is the broker of those things. Pearl Primus, the mother of African-American dance. Dai Alien, the mother of modern Chinese dance. The Kiskadi trio, Tiller, Invader, all of them there. The creation of the modern calypso form, Minshall, that's in Greece. The genius of Leroy Clark, the genius of Ellie Manette. Look at the crowd there on that street. Those are the 4 million I was telling you about in Brooklyn. Nicki Minaj, the most successful hip-hop artist. In fact, the three of the most successful hip-hop artists are all Trinidad and Tobago female, that's Cardi B, Foxy Brown, Nicki Minaj, right? And they all kind of have a similar personas and that kind of stuff, which kind of says something about Trinidad and Tobago. It's the Jamet kind of energy and that kind of thing. Harry Belafonte's Calypso, the first platinum album on planet Earth. It beats Elvis Presley's things. Rock and roll and Calypso were jostling for about 15 years to be the next pop culture of the States after jazz. More than 50-something, 60-something Calypso movies, all kinds of Calypso albums by popular singers at the time, all those different kinds of things. And Belafonte beats Elvis, with Calypso music being the first platinum albums on planet Earth. Brian Lara, who's there as artist as well as sportsman. Stokely Carmichael, one of the great liberation leaders of the last century, but who coins the phrase Black Power and gives an aesthetic component and contagious component to the culture of that revolution that then goes on to transform and metabolize in people's heads. Right. So that's us. It's genius beyond compare. When people going around the track in Olympics, you hear people with subcontinents and stuff, well, so-and-so, you see them here, still looking for their first medal at the games. We just get vexed when men don't get gold. What's wrong with he? Well, Uni Silva, that's what we expect, you know what I mean? But that expectation is kind of ridiculous but because we are boxing so much above our weight class that, but again, as I said earlier on, we lack process, which was the kind of beauty of Atto, because Atto was the person who taught the nation process. People was like, hey, why you can't win? And he's like, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in my training routine, whatever. I'm going to add 0.01 per seconds and that kind of stuff, and it's going to take half a month. And then I'm going to train whatever, and that kind of stuff and thing. And by December, I'm going to be matching the times or whatever. And all the time, and he schooled us. It was he's a remarkable individual for that. He schooled the administration. He schooled them into rewarding Hazley and rewarding all the old medalists and those kinds of things, and schooled them into programs and setting up coaching programs and those kinds of things. Because what I'm talking about here is process, lineage, right? The things don't happen just like that, right? Every single gain has been done through all kinds of strategies, and we have to be clear about what those have been. So, okay, the creative scene in Trinidad and Tobago. So, first of all, we live in an economy that has spent $2.2 trillion of public money in the last 2 decades, right? So, let's just get that clear. That's public money. We ain't talking about the drug money, right? We ain't talking about private money, whatever. Public purse, 2 trillion, sorry. sorry. I was saying that 2.2 trillion economy has passed us by, but we have spent more than $1 trillion as a people in our money in the last 2 decades. 1.3 million people. We should not even have a middle class. Right? Our argument should be real different. You know, as I always tell people, it's like we should be arguing about who Lamborghini, everybody can have the same color Lamborghini, because when we park outside, I can't find my Lamborghini. Everybody from Digo should have a red Lamborghini, and then people from East should have, you know, I mean, that should be our problems. But not where we are right now, with the amount of wealth that is passed through here. So, when ACT, we did like a deep dive. This is around probably about 7 or 8 years ago, into kind of finding out, you know, there are a lot of studies that have been done in Trinidad about the arts and whatever, and those kind of things, conducted by universities and scholars, whatever. And what we know as artists and as activists is that those things are not worth anything, because no artist tells any of those people the truth about income, outflows, nobody, right? But we decided we needed to know, we needed to find out, because we knew the figures, right? So we said, okay, let's us do these canvases. So a lot of the figures that you hear me speak about are us going through our processes of using the data that we captured on the ground, and I'll tell you about some of how we did some of that already. Well, according to our data at that time, there were about 10,000 active artists in Trinidad. These are people who say that they're artists, and that's what they see themselves, that's what they identify themselves as, and they work as. Now, they might work, some of them might work another job and that kind of stuff, but that's not who they see themselves as, right? They see themselves as artists. When that thing done, it is off to the dance, and that is the dance is the thing that is what they're about. The money from that they're making inside this thing is to sustain dance practice, right? And you said about 10,000 people like that in the space, right? Let's bear in mind, there are 239 steel orchestras in Trinidad and Tobago, right? So let's just say, on average, those 239 orchestras have 30 members. Do the maths, right? And then we also considered, we call all teachers who are teaching drama, whatever, literature, those kinds of things, as creatives. Because those people are within the loop of the creative industry loop. That's what they are. They're fulfilling that component of those kind of things, of matriculation in the things that we do, right? But these 10,000 artists are surrounded with about between 30 to 50,000 medium to passive artists, right? So that's about 40 to 60,000 people in the field that you could say are deathly creative, going about that work and that kind of stuff. And that all the things that we see generated all the time when you switch on your TV and you see people dancing and acting and saying whatever, and it's like somewhere in the country, somebody is working and doing that. Every time I go to a show, I am surprised. It's like, wow. Without any real support, somebody learning Katakali dance. You know what I mean? Somebody learning intricate kind of, like, you know what I mean, and that kind of stuff and thing. I mean, you know, and innovating on it and those kind of things and that kind of stuff. And it's like, that's who we are. That is a terrific kind of obsession. There's nothing to explain it, you know. It's who we are as creatives. So we don't have any real enablers, right, for these things to happen, right? We have a golden age generation, an important piece of elders who have mostly passed on. So according again to our historical research, 1930 to 1956 constitutes a kind of golden age. A real golden age in Trinidad and Tobago is the concretization of the pan-mass calypso into their modern forms, the ethnic festivals, male ethnic secret societies, the trade union movement, the fine arts movement, and its attack on the world and invasion of the world, CLR, etc., and those kinds of things. And the beginning of the independence movement is a very fervent period, right? So a golden age is a period where giants walk the earth, right? If you look at 2 years outside of it, you have normal people walking in the streets, and 2 years in after that point, all of a sudden when you look in that same street, every single person in that street, well, you know, there's so-and-so who runs so-and-so, and there's thing who coaching whatever, and there's he is the leader of thing, and she's the one who set up the whatever, and that is what happened during that period. And we said that there are 7 mother communities where those things mostly came from. We look at St. James Woodbrook as one, we look at Princestown Moruga as another one, look at Couva as one, Arima as another one, Point Fortin as another one, Tobago as a village, and then East Port of Spain, stretching from foothills of St. Anne's all the way to Mova at the tips of San Juan as the mother of mothers, the one where that germinates the Holy Trinity of Pan, Mars, and Calypso, and midwives a whole set of these things into existence and creates that thing that I spoke about, which I now have literally hundreds of millions of people on the streets of the world. The thing is, so we have this golden age generation from 30 to 56. In the 90s, because the way that I learned my craft was sitting down at the feet of elders, and I'm a multimedia artist, I work in 8 different mediums, so I was sitting down with a whole set of different sets of schools of people. I used to hear things from all these elders and those things, and then when they started to die, I noticed, right? I noticed in Grap that they were dying. And so that's how I was able to identify there was something called a golden age, and that, more importantly, that generation would most likely be mostly gone by 2012, right? That was when I said by the cutoff point in terms of the majority of that. You will still have stubborn ones, hardy kind of men who like, you know, I'm not going down, you know, like, you know, kind of stuff, and who's still with us, and that kind of thing, 96 and that kind of stuff, and still batting. But by 80 years old, you would start to, you have a massive passing, and sure enough, so we identified this, and we identified that there were 20,000 VIP elders across all different things in Trinidad. So I'm talking about science, the arts, in terms of business, in terms of all those kind of things. 20,000 elders without which there's no Trinidad and Tobago, right? You remove their story from the thing and the whole thing fall down. We are a normal country, you know, a country that never went through a golden age. And so we identified those people as the premium people whose memories and skills we needed to go after, right? And that kind of contextualized the first part of our activism. Most of those people are now dead, right? The last time I did a read, we had less than 200 of that cohort still with us. The issue was, at that time, in the early 90s, the mid-90s to the early 2000s, you had an under 35 generation that was unprecedented in Trinidad. It was 65% of the population, right? People like Chinese Laundry with 96.1 and 98.1, those are the ones who kind of won, when they identified that equation. Because we had what persisted before, and then all of a sudden you had this demographic, and who did not speak to that demographic and did not engage with that, the language of that demographic, flatline. And those who leaped and transformed survived, right? From political parties to you know, all kinds of things happened like that and that kind of stuff and thing, you know. So like by 1996, 1997, Chinese Laundry and them was 70% of the market, right? One radio station, right? That came out of nowhere, you know, and this are all Radio 100 and Radio Trinidad and institutions, you know, 5%. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, kind of thing. Don't know what hit them, right? Just like how Guardian and Express, they were watching the international transformation of print media, right? They knew that print media was dying and trying to calibrate Washington Post, New York Times, kind of thing, losing billions, trying to figure out how to remain in the game. But their figures that they were watching in front of them was that people were buying newspapers just like normal. Trinidadians were just buying newspapers just like that, and they said, well, we have time. Trinidadians are slow adapters, whatever. In 2 months, the behavior patterns of the 35 and overs just switched. As my generation, and I like a lot of the, you know, people just said, all of a sudden, like if we had a secret phone call, fellas, we ain't buying no more papers from now, you know, like if that phone call went out, everybody stopped buying papers. And all of a sudden, Guardian Express and stuff, 20,000 buyers vaporize in a month. 40,000, and in 3 months and 4 months' time, they're laying off hundreds of workers. It happens as quickly as that, right? The behavior shifts and that kind of stuff that are coded in technological shifts and those kinds of things. It's real, right? So if you don't pay attention to demographics, you will pay a price, right? And we paid that price in a number of ways. The way that we paid that price was that 65% of the population was under 35, and little to none of them have any idea of the legacy that I talked about of the Golden Age. Because of what I said before, because there are no spaces of memory, no institutions of memory, no engines of memory, no facilitators of memory, right? So what happened? A crisis of inheritance. And that crisis led to the collapse of traditions, institutions, and communities, right? So we've seen it all the time. Politicians talk about, well, the judiciary thing, this thing collapsing, what thing, entire communities, Belmont thing, Belmont is not like, oh, this, you know, how that happened? What? It's simple. If you don't have a center, the center cannot hold, and it will collapse, right? And we all know in Trinidad the magic of art. That once you add creativity and once you add IP or add the intangible, it becomes valueless to people, right? So, you know, so people will throw on a big concert and stuff and thing. People come out for the artist thing, whatever, and at the end of the show, promoter come, boy, well, you see what happened, you know, like we ain't make thing, you know. Behind, you see them paying the song man, full. You see them pay, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. But the artist lineup, fellas, well, you see what happened. You know what I mean? So, because as far as the country is concerned, that thing is valueless. And I will get into why. This is the reality of that last 2 decades, right? This is one of our greatest wire benders, right? And this is what happens. This is what happened. That context of the passing of that generation without transmission of valuable IP worth trillions of dollars. You cannot, I'm talking about the IP that put 40 by 40 foot sculptures up as kinetic things moving with no wheels and with 2 wheels and that kind of stuff. And with nobody else on planet Earth ever being able to do that. And still not able to do it. And that small cadre of men who knew how to do that, we did not see it fit to find out who, what, when, why, how. And because these things are discarded and there's no forensics to be done, we are now like the rest of the planet. We're watching pictures, if pictures do exist. We're watching pictures like, Bowie, you know what we do? I feel that's what we're doing. Right? Right. So, Richard was telling you, I had these little issues. We don't talk about the industry in a real way. Right? People have all kinds of cliches and that kind of stuff. artists need to get more business-like and thing and this and whatever, all kind of stupidness. Kind of thing that have absolutely nothing. The most entrepreneurial people in the Caribbean are artists. You know, the artists are the ones who have been risking. All our entrepreneurs are petty merchants bringing down export and selling shop floor, adding on a markup and that kind of stuff. The real capitalists, the real risk takers are the artists, right, who have been building billion-dollar economies, you know. So let's talk reality. This is the way we should be talking about the industry. So let's do an X-ray of the music industry. Music industry, income. Remember we said before, we sit down with real figures, real data. We know how much Marshall making per show. We know how much Kes making per show. We know inside Trinidad and outside of Trinidad and up the islands. We know all that information. Now, all them scholars and things don't, because when they tell them, we say, yeah, I'm making about 200,000 with, you know, I mean, that's a good, you know, I mean, we know the figures. These are the figures. You have one person, but these figures are about 2014, 2013. One person making $56 million a year. And you have about 7 people making between $1 million and $6 million, right? This is recent. About a couple years ago, it was only one other person was making $7 million, and 6 others might be making $1 million, a little more than $1.2 million, and that kind of stuff. If you remove prize money from that, most of them people fall to about 0.2, 0.5, whatever. And underneath them is subsistence. That is not an industry, right? The thing is, though, the reality on the ground is that if we just did the basic enablers that we told government had to do, just carry these people to the niche music expos, and they will get representation, stuff license, whatever. That's where the business of the industry happens. If you're not present, you don't exist. When Shaggy was the biggest artist in the world, it wasn't me, you know, 12 million, whatever, sold, whatever, that kind of stuff. The next year, he was in Midem on that factory floor like a pleb, working this thing, because if you're not there, you don't exist. We are not there, so we don't exist. Our craftspeople are not there in the major craft expos of the world, so we don't exist. And it's as simple as that. In Barbados, their craftsmen are middle class and upper middle class, right? And the government just did 2 interventions. They carry them to those expos every year, and they put their craft things in the middle of the tourist district, and they build them, and they make it slick, and they make it look like West Mall. And it's like, this is for you. And that's all. Those 2 interventions, people could send their children to university, whatever. Craftsmen, let them in. Fellas doing woodwork. And at one point in time, their stuff was acres below in terms of quality. Can't say that now, but you know, but that is what facilitation and an incubative environment is. So we said that if they did that for the musicians, there were at least 60 people that could be making between $20 to $50 million a year. About 200 that could have been making $1 million and more. And about dozens, hundreds, and dozens of others that could be 100,000 years. That is the kind of wealth that is there in terms of what people have in terms of the value of the material that they have, their catalogs, and their ability to perform. If we had just put them in the places where they were. And it's not the people we thought, because again, people don't talk about the industry properly. So everybody on Billboard, thing, whatever, who going up, you know what I mean? They're looking for somebody who's singing like what's going on right now, thing, whatever. No. Most of our valuable artists who would have been in that $50 million, $20 to $50 million range would have been like world beat artists. It would have been like Lara Brothers. It would have been like Shadow. It would have been like Robert Monroe. Authentic world beat artists who would have signed to small and medium-sized world beat labels, sold about 60,000 albums a year, and been on the road between 100 to 150 days of a year. making between 5,000 to 15,000 US per show. That is the real world of the music industry. People making middle-class lives and upper-class lives and working, poor and working-class lives and stuff from the grist of their work. And we just happen to have a lot of things of value. The proof of the pudding, the only person who went through the life cycle of the things that we said that they should was Calypso Rose. And what happened? She's now the biggest female world beat artist in the world, right? But we'll come to that. So, no, it's still on the same thing. Right. So, again, we have world beat artists, rock artists, R&B artists, all these kinds of people. These are the people who have niches where they can be monetized. They have a whole college circuit and university circuit on both coasts that just want live music, looking for live music. The reggae and dancehall acts inside there at 90 all the time. They just ramming up inside there. If you're not at the expos, you don't exist. We are nowhere in thing. But then it's not who we think we have to send. It's not them. It's people like Joint Pop and Orange Sky. And, it's not who we think. Who wins Soca Monarch this year? We have to send him. No. The curation, understanding the sound and the taste of the mainstream. Right? So, a lot of these things are also sabotaged locally because we have 5 to 10% local content on our radios and television, right? And there's like 40 radio stations now, 15 television stations, 5 to 10% local content. As I said, the rest of the planet is moving towards full local content regime, right? There was a point in time in the early 2000s when we were the only country that was heading into the negatives. Everybody else was adding on. We were the only ones, militantly so by our state, our government. Militantly. We refuse, We refuse to support, Right. So, we have the music industry. So I just want to say, I want us to remove some veils and talk about the industry in a way that we're not talking about it and those kinds of things to show, okay. So let's talk about the Carnival, right? At its height, this is 2006 figures, tourism board figures. They did a comprehensive Carnival deep dive study. It's a very, very important study. They identified that we had at that point in time 65,000 visitors for Carnival. That was the high end. That was us at pinnacle, right? In 2008, with the crash, the worldwide banking and financial crash, that dropped to 20,000 people. This year, last year, it has been wiggling its way back. It's back up to about 45,000 now. That is a big drop. And especially considering that all the time our optimum was really probably about 100,000. That's what we should have been aiming for, right? And that 100,000, now at 60,000 we're maxing out our room rate in terms of hotels and the formal guest house sector and stuff, right? So you have to open up the informal sector, Airbnb, whatever. But also, we have an ace in the hole. We found out that we could have been offering cruise ships fuel subsidies to break their route during Carnival and come here for Carnival. You're talking about 20,000 people on these ships. 7, 15, 20,000 people. If you have 4 liners outside, parked up, do the maths. And we have oil and gas, but we had with Petrotrin. we could have multiplied geometrically the amount of multiplier economies and stuff that we could have had coming off for the carnival, right? For that week, that last week and the 2 days. So the other thing that happened to Trinidad was in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had problems with the brand ambassadors. There were a series of, pass my phone to me. There were a series of people who broke Trinidad and Tobago internationally. These were journalists, Time Magazine, Life Magazine, National Geographic, Washington Post, New York Times. People who just discovered Trinidad, fell in love with Trinidad, and they got us prime column inches, those kind, for free in these magazines and that kind of stuff. And that was what led to the kind of surge of the kinds of visitors that we started to get that filled up that 65,000, right? A lot of older, white, you see them, you know that we don't see that type of tourists anymore, right? Kind of older, white, European, married couple, kind of those kind of things. Those are not the kind of tourists that come here anymore. But this thing was broken like that. But we mistreated those journalists. I knew a couple of them, right? So there was one year in particular, there was, I can't remember, it was an airline strike, international, whatever. They were getting difficulty in coming into Trinidad. They called TDC, well, at the time, TIDCO, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We need some help getting into the country. They get abused, they get whatever. But short, Air Jamaica, Sandals, called these journalists and said, I hear that you're getting problems with Trinidad. I will fly you into Trinidad on Air Jamaica, but in exchange for you now covering Jamaica Carnival, right? I want whatever and that kind of stuff. Some of these people were so vexed with the mistreatment that Trinidad have. They swore in front of me, Rubadiri, I done with Trinidad, you know. I am going to build Barbados and Jamaica's carnival. So what you all have and that kind of stuff and that kind of thing. Well, they don't know how to treat people. So said, so done. These are the kinds of relationships and stuff that make up the creative industries. Relationships, right? It's nurturing of networks, nurturing of your brand ambassadors, nurturing of those people and those kind of things, figuring out all kinds of different ways that you could work with these people and that kind of stuff to make things happen, right? You have to understand the value that they bring to your brand and stuff and things. We didn't do that, and we paid an enormous price. So when we went back and we tried to get Trinidad, it was a National Geographic, it was, that kind of stuff. I think we paid, how much? Millions of dollars to get those articles, Life or whoever did it, when they did fashion, whatever. Millions and millions of dollars, right, to get the thing, and it's a sponsored kind of thing a little. So we all know that apart from those visitors, that the indigenous crowds are no longer there. It used to say that it used to take you 2 hours to walk from Independence Square to Queen Street in Carnival of yore. I'm talking 30 years ago, right? Just for the thickness of people, you're just climbing through people. Now, Monday and Tuesday, downtown, is like Sunday. They have nobody, right? It is because we could say that they said there's about 60,000 active participants in the carnivals on Monday and Tuesday. People on kind of stuff. I think at its height, we probably had about 100,000. I would think that's from that kind of read of thing, because those crowds used to be thick all the way up, all the savannah, all those roads. It was people. All Woodbrook, people, St. James, you could not negotiate. You would not see somebody twice. You know what I mean? Most of that is the loss of creativity and loss of spectacle and those kinds of things on the street. A huge part of that is the loss of the working class participation in the festival. the black, especially the black urban Port of Spain working class, who created Pan Mas and Calypso. The ones who midwifed these things into existence. The ones who do not partake in the $15 billion global economy of it. They are the ones completely locked out of the space and those things. Why? The economics on the ground, a lot of things change. Working class, Trinidad, the reason why Trinidad has the contagious carnival that it has, there are two reasons. One is that we are the recipients of the great festival tribes of the peoples of the world. So the West Africans from Africa came here, right? Igbo, Fulani, Ashanti, Yoruba, the Congo, that the festival seat of Africa comes here. Bengal and Bihar come here from India, right? Massive Ganga festivals and Hanuman festivals and Ganesh festivals and that kind of thing. Millions of people on the streets and stuff. This was the festival seat of Native America. People coming here from as far as Cuba and from the mainland to consecrate priests in sacred sites in Aripo, Naparima, and El Takush. The French come here from during the Louis XIV and XV. This is when they had the most flamen. This is who comes here. These are the divas who come here. So that's a remarkable collection of the festival peoples of planet Earth. When those drummers and masqueraders heard one another, across the way they understood one another one time. And I always say the first Trinidadians were the no-teeth men, right? Drummers and artisans and dancers, the no-teeth men, if you go around the thing, you would say something, and over, you know you have your teeth. But it's like you said, it's the no-teeth men. The men who like to drink and that kind of stuff and thing, those are the first Trinidadians and Tobagoans. Those are the people who cross lines, who were not supposed to cross lines. Show me what you're doing there. How you all think, whatever, and who inside one another feast, and one another puja, and what. Those are the first Trinidadians. The first Trinidadian events, the real independence of Trinidad happens in the 1890s, right? Cambule riots, the first time that Trinidadians are risking blood on identity, saying, I am willing to die for a construct of something that I feel that is me of here. I'm willing to die for it. I'm willing to kill and die for it. Just later on in that decade, the Jose riots, the Hindus and Muslims together with Africans, doing Jose. And by this time, of course, if you read the accounts, in the carnival already, you have Jose Tajas, Krishna floats, and all those things inside the carnival. In the early 1900s, you hear Errol Hill talk about a Borokit coronation ceremony in Maravala, East Indian Borokit, Hindu Borokit coronation ceremony. Full carnival, Ram Leela, mixed with secular folk India, and that kind of stuff and those kind of things. A full spiritual, secular Borokits and stuff, featuring Hindu gods, carnival characters, and all kinds of things mixed up in one. This is just 40 years after they arrived. 20 years after they arrived, they have tajas and stuff inside the carnival. That is us. So, because of that, we have this Trinidad and Tobago carnival. But the other thing that we have is that we have the great ex-slave artisan class. Because there's a port town, you have industrial artisans, agricultural artisans, traditional artisans. You have men who, in all these different forms of industry and that kind of stuff. So when time came to solve a problem, how we get this 30-foot by 30-foot thing up in the air, men had extra amounts of skills that they could have brought to the table. And that artisan class was an exceptional artisan class. And that artisan class was the backbone of the economies of ex-slave African villages and towns and stuff throughout the 1900s. That artisan class was decimated in the 80s with import substitution when they brought in, well, where the warehouses bring in clothes, you know, the Syrians started to bring in clothes and they had the retail and that kind of stuff and those kind of things. Without the enablers and stuff for the artisan class, like what happened in Italy, for instance, right? So they always say Gucci, Armani, all these things are just tailors. But they were tailors that were facilitated by state funding and mafia. But they were facilitated by these multiple kinds of entities and that kind of thing to becoming what they are. We had comparable brands, talents, and that kind of stuff, but we did not do that. And we decimated those economies. So that's when Belmont and all those things and that's when people migrated en mass migrations and that kind of stuff. The flip side to that was those artisans that created a lot of the 300 Trinidad-style carnivals. So that is the flip side of the equation. But it meant that we began already in a space that with no cultural memory and no places of transmission, the collapse became more heated. So you had things happening like Peter Minshall became the recipient of the collapse Belmont artisan bands. So when all the Belmont, or most of the Belmont artisan bands collapsed in the 80s, and that kind of stuff, most of their lead artisans, the Baileys and the Morrises and all those other guys and that kind of thing, went to Minshall. So that was Minshall's golden age. And Minshall's golden age was facilitated by the artisan class. So he could have dreamed up whatever he wanted. You know, at another time he could have dreamed up what he wanted and he would have been an incredible comic book artist. But he had the artisans who could have executed anything he dreamt of at that point in time. So that decimation happened and it collapsed. And then we have also the fact that because there's no enabling environment for the creatives, tra-la-la-la-la, the only entryway into the carnival is now the marketplace. If you have private wealth outside of this thing, right? Before, when these things were created by villages, the Golden Age communities, right? The payment was, people would put on a band of 500, 700 people, and they might have spent $35,000, $10,000 to $35,000. That's it, right? Why? Most of the people in the mass camp working for the food that Miss Smiley doing in the pot there and that kind of stuff, and the music and the old talk and whatever, and the village brought out these bands. That no longer persists. If you have to sustain a mass camp of 35 people working for 20 nights to bring out a band, now, in this economy where you have to pay people minimum wage or whatever, working wage and that kind of stuff, do the maths. How many working class people and communities could now enter that? It costs over $250,000 to bring out a small to medium-sized band. When I started Juve, it used to cost us $5,000 to $10,000 to bring out a Juve band, 20-something years ago. Now it is between $65,000 to $125,000 to bring out a Juve band of about 500 to 600 people. A Juve band, 3 hours. How many working class people could afford the economies of Carnival right now? So now, the working class, we see them as CPEP workers, PP trucks, rope holders. Because for them, it's a hustle. For them, that's $250 a day, Diri. Me, I have no time for that thing. $250 is just like thing. And These are the people whose fathers, grandfathers created some of the greatest spectacles that we ever witnessed in our lives. So we have, because of that, the rise of the Mardi Gras, the middle class who had, and the 1% who can now enter the carnival because they're the ones who can afford to. Right? So I don't want to get into that whole thing. The other piece of carnival that we don't talk about is that most people lose money in carnival, despite all those things I just said. Right? People don't talk about that. Right? Most medium-sized, large band leaders, I'd say about 3-4 of them might be making money. Again, we know the figures. We know the masked men and stuff. We know men who mortgaging houses and who going into hundreds of thousands of debt ritually every year because of this thing. Because these are the traditional guys who still feeling it and thing, right? I don't want to call people names, but you know the great medium-sized band leaders and that kind of stuff and those kind of things and stuff, who's still trying to do it even though, again, the formula on the ground has changed. But they are the ones who still, I don't do it, they're like, who doing individuals and who doing king and queens and who doing it the old way? This is realities. These are things that we're not talking about and those kinds of things. If you're not talking about, if you don't understand that this is reality on the ground, then you can't solve the problems, right? The other thing is that we speak about carnival as if it is an event. So in the last 10 to 15 years, all kinds of event manager people make real money. They bring in all kinds of consultants, abroad and local, right? You know, the band on the road is an event. The bands on the road is an event. The march cry is an event. These are not events. These are rituals, right? The marche gras is the head gael of the country where all the kings and the queens come to do battle. And if you pick the kings and the queens, the best kings and queens, the whole nation, eyes will be and souls will be transfixed, because that's what we created in Carnival. We created a series of forms where kings and queens conjugated us, the best of us, the worst of us for that year. That song, that calypso song, that everybody before 30 years ago when the march cry used to happen, everybody, you can't start Carnival unless you know who wins the march cry. If you fall asleep, if you're outside, like, who win? Who wins? Like, you know, like, what? Shotway win? How the hell Shotway? Like, you know, I mean, you feel, because those songs conjugated us. That Carnival king and queen conjugated us. This is before the judges, the bourgeois judges, the political judges interfered with the people's thing and killed the connection between the people and the thing. So it moved to Soca Monarch, where people were voting with their participation with the song, right? Again, demographic, right? Monroe understood that. He watched the thing. He said, they're killing it dead. Where the thing is, boy, it's in the fats, but it have nothing for that music. That's the next thing. Monroe is excellent at seeing those things and that kind of stuff. Again, that kind of entrepreneur is essential to the thing. All right, let's move on quickly. Skip that. What ACT did for the last 20 years was create an ecosystem of enablers. They're all there on the website. Policy enablers, legislative enablers, institutions, fiscal enablers, municipal codes, programs, those kinds of things. Some of them, most of them are international best practice things which have been put in place since the 1920s in most of the economies of the world. So again, my scholarship, there were 4 waves of creative industry enablers on planet Earth, right? Where there were massive transformations in short periods of time with, like, say, municipal codes, broadcast codes, quotas, different kinds of things, mostly linked to technological shifts and those kinds of things. And that created a web of enablers that enabled, by the time the creative revolution happened in the early 2000s, that there was an entire web of supportive things, from arts councils to museum complexes to broadcast laws to all kinds of different things that facilitated this thing, and people were able to monetize, right? We made our platform the getting of these things, right? The thing is, we know that they work. How do we know that they work? There have been certain times when government banned, we were able to get them to do, through extraordinary duress and all kinds of things, to do those things. And for short, small windows, we have paper trails where we could see what was possible. So we created a film industry ecosystem. They wanted, when they finally listened to us, they were interested in creating a film industry based on foreigners coming along here and shooting stuff. And we were saying, you cannot do that. It has to be based first on a domestic television industry, right? Because even those foreigners want to come down here and they want to work with professionals in the field and that kind of stuff and thing. And if they have no professionals who are operating at that capacity and those kind of things, they will not come. So we had to sell all kinds of things. And we fought 7 years from the point in time when they said that to the point when we got it adopted. And up until the day before the adoption, there was a big thing in Movie Town. I had to stand up and, rest in peace, God bless his soul, and threaten the then trade minister, Ken Valley. He said that you will pay an enormous price if you go ahead and make it a foreign-based thing. You will pay that price. And silence in the room. When we come out the room, nobody talking to me. All my friends, everybody, right? And that kind of stuff. But the next day, it get called, though. The next day, local content was embedded in the thing. So I have no problems paying the bad cop and those things, because that is what it takes, right? The silence and the thing and the cuteness and the whatever, it don't work. You know how many threats and things and leaked things to press and all kinds of stuff it took to get whatever we have in place here? So, in the 5 years that TT Film operated as it should, we got them to sign international Carney treaties for custom things. They passed rebate laws, tax incentives, all those things, all the things, the full things that the generations before me that I inherited, the things that I got from them, that I made the agenda, we got those things. For 5 years, more than 700 films, shorts and features and stuff shot by Trinidadians in that period. Dozens and dozens of companies that are now working and stuff, employing hundreds and hundreds of people, are now production companies, and those kinds of things are now alive and abroad in the land, and those kinds of things. People winning international awards, people now going on to work in, get Hollywood jobs and thing, and working in Pixar and with Will Smith and from the work that was generated by those things that they did here. We know what happens in that period. Jean-Michel Gibert, Rituals and Medium. I said before, if you don't go to the expos, you don't exist. The only people at the expos are labels and nations. The Jamaican booth is like big, every year is big like this thing, every year. Jamaica is present, all their brands are inside, big tent thing, and they're doing it. We have no presence. The only time we had presence, Jean-Michel Gibert of Rituals Music, a Frenchman who came down here, fell in love with our music, and started to invest. 5 years out of, in 19 years, he carried troops, because it's a very capital-intensive thing. You have to do, that kind of stuff. And never consecutive years, except for one exception. In those 5 times, we made $150 million worth of deals. All the major deals that have been done, all the platinum albums for Who Let the Dogs Out, the license of Who Let the Dogs Out, Dollar Wine, Moving to the Left, all those things and that kind of stuff. Soca, the young girl in need that song and that kind of stuff. These are platinum songs and those kinds of things. All of those things were from the times that we went there. But we never went consecutive times, except one person. Who? You weren't paying attention. Calypso Rose. So, what happens? People have attention, they get a deal. You get a little a touring deal, 40 dates in Europe, and that kind of stuff. But you never show back up the next year. So you're not in the game, right? There are people who there. It's 70,000 people on that shop floor. People are there to do business. If you're not there, you're showing that you're not interested in business, right? And they will get people, those is a few slots, you know? Rose went. First year, European deal, whatever. Second year she went, she had the film and that kind of stuff. She got her next deal again. Film gets picked up by PBS in America. The music, the tour gets extended. She got a partially American tour. The next year, one of the top world beat producers in the world sees her and that kind of says, it's like, this is the woman I want to work with on her album and that kind of stuff and that kind of thing. Rose is on her way. The top 3 world beat matriarchs all die in that same period. And the world beat scene is looking for a matriarch to take the mantle of the matriarch of world beat music. Who is there? Rose. Time and place. Right? People, again, we don't talk about it properly. It's like, hey, but Rose, she out there and she doing the thing, and Rose had the music, Rose music, real good. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with process. Simply process. If we had put Robert Monroe in through that process, Robert Monroe would be making millions of dollars on the stage. If you had put Lara Brothers through that process, the most authentic folk artists and stuff, they would have been doing it. But we didn't, right? Robert Monroe died having produced only 1 album, possibly the greatest quattroista in the world in his entire lifetime. 1 album of music. We know that having an academy works. Yes, we fought for it to be better equipped and better programmed and those kinds of things. But right now, every single year, there are hundreds of creative young people graduating and coming out of tertiary level education where they are working, they're doing 10,000 hours on their instruments and in their mediums, free of charge in enabled environments. How I wish when I was younger that somebody was paying me for 4 years to play a guitar. And Joey, where Joey? You know what I mean? You know? You just chill and do whatever you want, man, and that kind of thing, you know what I mean? 4 years, you just sing, and the best teachers and things come into here, and you know? Now, whatever the limitations of those programs, it means that you have a generation of practitioners that are coming out with those 10,000 hours. And in the spaces where you have the young artists who are compensated by indigenous things, because the thing about the UTT program is that it's not indigenous and rooted enough, right? So it's not matriculating people. The point of our academy is to matriculate people in your traditions. That's the only point of our academy. Is to matriculate your people in your traditions. After that, you could do Drama 101 and whatever. But the first thing is to matriculate people in your own traditions. When the Golden Age was dying and they were building Napa, we told them, it's like, make Napa the master guild of the country. Bring in all these artisans and those kinds of things, make them masters, artists in residencies and those kind of things. You don't want to call them professors, because they're too posh and you don't want to call them that, fine. Call them any one of those other things. Let them create masterworks with master apprentices and document and codify the process. Don't expect them to codify and matriculate the way that a professor will. Let them matriculate by practicums. Capture the data, let these professors afterwards go through the data and derive curricula from it. But again, we told them you have until 2012 or they're dead. It's gone. They refused. And well. Okay. I thought I would be able to get through a lot of this, you know. But yeah. All right, so Rose. All right, I'm going to run to a couple of things. What we say in ACT is that what is possible is, right now, the creative industries contribute about 1.1 billion. It probably is down to about 725 million or something like that with the drop in Carnival visitors. 1.1 billion to 1.3 billion a year. What we told them is that with the basic enablers in place, we could jump to about $6 billion in 3 years, right? Because of how the arts worked in terms of geometric increases and things. When KMC had the number 72 number 72 thing on Billboard and that kind of, you know, I mean, nothing, you can't scoff at it and that kind of stuff. That was still worth $3 million to him and millions of dollars to his label. And that was something that he did in his studio for $6,000, right? A song that he did for $6,000 made that money, right? That is how the sector works. This is not a sector like manufacturing and all those kinds of things which requires the replication of factors of production for the creation of units, right? From the time the prototype is made, you could make infinite amounts of that from the prototype for almost nothing. And the value of that could escalate in the marketplace to all kinds of different kinds of things. And that is the power of the creative. No, not yet. I'll just now. Right? So we said that just $6 billion could be made in 3 years. And that if we put most of the things in place, we think that the contribution to the economy could be between $15 to $20 billion annually. It will probably take about 8 years, depending on how the rollout is. And the breakdown in the short term is heritage economy could make about $1 billion. The genius class, that is releasing the genius class, the people like the KMCs and the Marshalls and the Minchells and those kind of things, could make about $2 billion a year. Carnival and festivals and events could make about $2 billion. And IP licensing, patents, and new media could make another $1 billion. So, all right, closing. There's a lot more. What existed before ACT? Before ACT stepped into the environment, there used to be one budget, one sentence on arts in the budget nationally for years. And a home for the arts will be built on Princess Building grounds, right? You remember that phrase, right? It used to be a joke amongst artists and stuff for somebody who lie. When you know a man lie and that kind of stuff, you say, yeah. And a home for the arts will be built on Princess Building grounds, right? And that was the only sentence, right? That is what we met. Because I'm a multimedia artist, I knew that government used to be going to the National Dance Association, telling them, we're going to build it, and we put in all in charge, And then you used to go to the NDAT Drama Association, be building it. But them dance people, like, we want all you in charge. And that's how they used to play off all the groups against one another. So everybody nursing these promises. So when you get a knife in your back, nobody know that you're dying alone in a corner over so. So there's a set of artists dying in corners and that kind of stuff of dead promises. There was zero language of arts as an industry anywhere in the entire ministry firmament. All that existed were community education programs. The period of the golden age, that's the age of James Lewa, Torrance Mohammed, Beryl, Kyle Chang, Ramissa, J.D. Elder, Wong Sang, the creation of external things like the TTTs and that kind of stuff, and the best villages, and the folk documentation and the memory stuff. That golden age had passed in the 70s, and by the 80s, is routed, right? As again, all these other routes that are happening because of the boom, because we're rich and everybody know how the thing's supposed to run and flow. Local content. Apart from the NAR, which had progressive programs on the ground, which was scuttled by the coup, that was all she wrote. That is what we stepped into. In 97, Tony Hall, Michael Sherry, and myself got together and canvassed all the artist groups and all the head artists and those kinds of things for all the demands. What are the things that, it's like Tony was saying about the foundation, a Caribbean Foundation for the Arts, Michael, and a union, artist union, and I was collating. And we thought it was going to be this massive encyclopedia of demands like that. It turned out to be 6 institutional complexes and 11 pieces of legislation. And that was it. That was what everybody was battling for and stuff. And we didn't know, we had not concretized it and cemented it and stuff. And those things became the thing. And what we did during that period, and I'll end here, unfortunately, the way that we changed, the way that we went about engagement was the first thing that we said is things that had to be transparent. If government tells us something, everybody will know what that thing is by the next day. Every single thing, whatever, it's not kind of thing, but it's a secret or whatever kind of thing. Any meeting that we have, this is like I'm telling you that whatever we discuss here is going to be out there. We consulted with people. We compiled stuff. We created a holistic agenda. And then we employed strategies. We looked at international activism strategies. We looked at what worked here. We looked at what didn't work. We looked at what never was attempted. We knew that we never marched as artists. We were the only sector in the country. People didn't have water for 2 days. They burning tires, they marching, whatever. We taken unprecedented levels of marginalization, sabotage, all kinds of things. And we who are supposed to be the most revolutionary groups in society, completely polite and silent. So one of the things that I canvassed for years was that we had to at least find a forum, a cause that would get us out in the streets for them to see us and to know that that whole relationship no longer existed. And quotas became that cause. So when the local content thing is reaching a height where people realizing that they're producing stuff and it's not being seen, Gael is the only game in town, whatever, and those kinds of things. I started lobbying for people to march for quotas because I thought that the musicians were probably the most militant of all the artists at the time. For a year, 8 months, every single forum, every single thing, I get up and stuff, yeah, people, thing, like, and everybody, oh gosh, Rubadiri, thing, oh gosh, thing, then we will take we on. I said, well, let's do it, thing, whatever. What happens? A journalist hears about a normal meeting of artists happening in Amar, Kiskadi, Caravan, stuff. Mistakes it for a quota meeting and writes that artists are gathering for a quota march meeting at Amar. So I show up at the meeting expecting the same 7 people that would normally show up to these things. 40-something people there and thing. We ready? And I was like, these are the same people before all the time. Let's move. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, like, we have to march. And I was like, okay. So I start to act on the march. The other heads of the meeting say, no, that's not what we're here for. And that meeting is probably the most important meeting in terms of the artists, because the battles, the psychological battles that had to be fought in that 3 hours to get people to the place where we were on the road is what determined all the successes that happened after that. People, by the end of the meeting, because there are people who was obviously saboteurs, who were sent to sabotage the meeting, who were pushing things between people, all kinds of things were happening in the meeting. In the end, it was decided, and 400 artists marched in the road for the first time. And I have to thank people like Andre Tanker, David Rudder, Shadow, like big gun artists came out, to be seen and heard. And it was the first time. What happened? We marched down Frederick Street, Independence Square, came up by the Hall of Justice, in front of the AG's place. And we marched in front of the AG. Ramesh was AG at the time. His secretary comes down, and she calls me and two other leaders of the march. Come upstairs now and draft it into the telecommunication. That was the other thing. The Telecommunication Act was called in the week after, and we were trying to get it into that act. She said, come and draft the language into the act. So, all right. I always have it there. So pull it out, and we draft thing. Because we had the other thing that we did, we hired lawyers, economists, accountants, architects. That's what we did. The Tuesday comes, and we all listening. They read out the thing. They come to the part with the clauses and whatever. Nothing, and then they move on. And we like, what just happened then? Call Ramesh after the thing. It's just like, Minister, what's going on? AG or he was looking at some Canadian precedent and something at the US and whatever. We say that they're not holding what you're telling us there, and nothing is the same thing. That having no water, that's completely irrelevant to this act. And what we found out within the day was that the party financiers, the Chamber of Commerce, the Broadcaster Association, and the Advertisers Association called them and told them, take that out. And for the first time, we knew who our enemies were. We never knew who were the enemies on the other side. We always thought government and thing and rah and whatever. But there was a shadow cabinet calling all those shots. And from since then, those people have had to sit down in the meetings with us and argue their cause, pro and con, anytime that the legislation comes back. We come with things stick like that, they come with their hands swinging. We come with precedents from all over the world. There's 100% success ratio with local content quotas across planet Earth. There is no success story outside of it for a broadcast industry. None. People say New Zealand don't have quotas and that kind of stuff. New Zealand, they say that's because New Zealand signed something with the US that they could not. In a free trade agreement, they couldn't pass quotas. But New Zealand is part of the Australian quota system. So New Zealand content is counted as Australian content. So New Zealand actually has a continental audience for its goods and services and that kind of stuff. So there is no success story without content quotas. And we have lived to see where the chambers of commerce have defected from that side because of the signing of the EPA, because they signed the European Partnership Agreement, signing away their abilities to have quotas and subsidies and those kinds of things. They have looked to the artists to get our quota things in so that they have a window to ideologically get to government to be able to. So I have been part of a local chamber of local content with Manufacturers Association and whatever, all of them who were enemies before sitting down crafting local content agendas and policies for government, for the nation. These are the things that we did. We started speaking the policy language. We broke the stereotype and the behavior that artists cannot and are not supposed to be able to organize. The time that we had our greatest success in a budget and that kind of stuff was the first time they encountered the coalition. And we lobbied until we got a cabinet meeting post-FMGP for the budget. And they said, all right, this taking artists making noise and in the street, that thing, and this Rubadiri, whatever. And we walked in with 16 heads into that meeting, Trinidad, and the whole cabinet was, everybody sat up in his seat and it was like, they didn't understand what happened. And we sat down there with the agendas and we said, let's talk. And they had to listen because they're doing the counts. Trinidad, 239 orchestras by 30 people, dance association, probably about 5,000 10,000 dancers, whoever body, they have, and then they realize, okay, we have to listen. All right, so I really, really thought I could have burned through 20 years, and we only reached the first 5. The thing is that what I'm trying to do with this conversation is, this is the way that we have been talking about the industry for 20 plus years, right? It is a way that has cut across the misunderstandings, the stereotypes, all the other stupidness that people has been talking, and the artists need to do this and that, and if they only thing and whatever. No. That's not how the planet works, and nothing in the world works in those ways. We have to start talking with reality about these things. We have to stop like how I talk about the Carnival, and by talking about the Carnival, we talk about the collapse of Belmont and East Port of Spain and that kind of stuff, because we're talking about the collapse of the artisan class that was at the center of it, because we're talking about the lack of enabling environments, which are a feature since the 1920s of other spaces all over the world who understood the importance of those folk artisans and those things and made them the center of the transformations. The entire German engineering economy is not based upon German masters and doctorate engineers. It is based on artisans, guild artisans on the ground. That's what it's based on. The craftsmanship and the care and the rigor and those kinds of things. And that's because hundreds of millions of dollars is poured into that. Infrastructure, schools, academies, spaces, zones are created to facilitate those people, because those people are worth billions of dollars to Germany, and they are worth an infinite amount to their brand. At one point in time, we had a lot of that value inside of us. A lot of those things are in jeopardy now. And as I said, I keep thinking that, but I can't cheat this stuff. The things are what they are. They deserve to be interrogated the way I have been interrogated. And I hope you agree. I hope you've been, have you been hearing things that you haven't heard before, or new things? Yes? It is to remove veils. It is to speak to things in transformative ways, in the ways that I learned from the elders that I learned my intellectual line from. CLR James, Gordon Rolle, Lloyd Bess, especially CLR, right? That kind of the Marxist line, or what he called the Marxist line in terms of delineating, describing phenomena faithfully, and coming to conclusions because of that honest description, not because of any predetermined idea that you have because you're bright and you feel that, well, this is how it works, and then you're looking for the evidence of it on the ground, and even when the evidence is not there, you're still saying, well, this is why, whatever. Just describe the batsman on the turf, on the wicket, in Tunapuna, outside your window, and you solve 200-year-old historical problems because of the line of his thing, and just describing it faithfully, that you could see 3 generations of working class, agricultural workers, artisans, whatever, in that line, in that hand, in that march, in that whatever. You're seeing a certain kind of thing in that eye that comes from X dedication to this job during the day, whatever. Just describe it faithfully. It will reveal to you what is really going on and the solutions that are there to be had. So, as I said, I probably am going to have to find some way to have this again. If you're all willing to come for one more session where we try to get that other part in. Yeah, and and close it off there for now.